He was dying, and his children were celebrating his death. How did this cruelty happen? Let's watch it together. But before, please subscribe to my channel. The champagne glass slipped from Chief Karlos's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of his mansion. But no one noticed. His entire family stood around his hospital bed, the same bed where he had been fighting for his life just hours ago, and they were celebrating. "Thank God Papa survived," his son Chidi laughed, but his eyes were on his phone, texting someone about postponing a big purchase. His daughter Lara hugged him briefly before whispering to her husband about having to wait longer now. His eldest son Obinna patted his shoulder while quietly discussing business transfers with his lawyer in the corner. Only his wife Adana seemed genuinely relieved, but even her tears felt hollow somehow. As Karlos lay there, weak from his real heart attack, listening to his family's strange version of celebration, a terrible realization crept into his mind like poison. Were they happy he survived, or disappointed? 2 weeks later, Karlos was strong enough to return to his office. His company, Okafor Construction, occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper he had built with his own hands 30 years ago. He had started with nothing, a village boy who mixed cement and carried bricks, and built an empire worth billions of naira. But that day, as he walked slowly through his office, he discovered something that would change everything. His secretary, Mrs. Ifoma, looked nervous when she saw him. "Chief, you should not be working so soon. The doctors said I am fine," Karlos interrupted gently. "Just bring me the files from last week." What he found in those files made his blood run cold. During the 3 days he had been unconscious in the hospital, fighting for his life, his family had been busy. Obinna had tried to withdraw 2 million naira from the company account for medical expenses that had never existed. Chidi had contacted the family lawyer asking about emergency inheritance procedures. Lara had hired an appraiser to value the family mansion. Most devastating of all was a recording his security manager handed him. Conversations from the hospital waiting room that had been accidentally captured by the building's security system. "If Papa doesn't make it," Obinna's voice was clear on the recording, "we need to move fast. The will gives us equal shares, but I should handle the business side." "What about Mama?" Lara had asked. "She'll get her portion, but let's be honest, she's getting older too. This money needs to be managed by people who understand it." Chidi's young voice was the most painful. "I never thought the old man would actually have a heart attack. Good timing, though. I have some debts that need paying." They had laughed. While he was dying, his children had laughed about his good timing. Karlos sat in his office chair, the same chair where he had worked 18 hours a day for decades to build wealth for these people, and wept like a child. That night, Karlos couldn't sleep. He walked through his mansion, 15 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, a swimming pool, gardens that cost more to maintain than most people's salaries, and felt more alone than he had ever felt in his 75 years of life. He found himself in his study, looking at family photographs. There was Obinna's graduation from London University, paid for with money Karlos had earned working 19-hour days. There was Lara's wedding, a celebration that had cost more than building an entire school. There was Chidi's 21st birthday party, a carnival of excess that had lasted 3 days. In every photo, his children looked happy and prosperous. But looking at the pictures now, Karlos realized something heartbreaking. In most of them, they were looking at their gifts, their achievements, their possessions. Very few showed them looking at him with genuine love or gratitude. "They don't love me," he whispered to the empty room. "They love what I can give them." The idea came to him slowly, like sunrise after the darkest night. What if he tested them? What if he pretended to be dying, not suddenly, like his heart attack, but gradually, the way old men sometimes faded away? Would anyone stay with him for love instead of money? Would anyone care about his fears, his memories, his heart, or only about his will? It was a dangerous plan. It could destroy his family forever. But Karlos realized that his family might already be destroyed. He just hadn't seen it clearly before. Dr. Adebayo, his longtime friend and physician, was reluctant to help. "This is madness, Karlos," the doctor said in his office. "What if you discover things that break your heart?" "My heart is already broken," Karlos replied quietly. "I just want to know if there's any genuine love left to heal it." The plan was simple, but devastating. Karlos would gradually appear to grow weaker. Dr. Adebayo would run fake tests and deliver a terminal diagnosis. They would tell the family he had 6 months to live, maybe less. "And then?" Dr. Adebayo asked. "Then I will see who stays with me because they love me, and who stays because they love my money." The performance began on a Monday morning. Karlos started moving more slowly, complaining of tiredness. He canceled business meetings for the first time in 40 years. At dinner, he pushed food around his plate, claiming he had no appetite. "Papa, you look pale," Adana said, but she was distracted, reading messages on her phone. "Just tired, my dear," he replied, studying her face for genuine concern. He saw worry, but it felt shallow, like she was worried about a problem that might disrupt her comfortable life. By the end of the week, his children were calling more frequently, but their conversations felt strange. "Papa, are you taking your medications?" Obina would ask, but then quickly shift to discussing company business and suggesting that Karlos should delegate more responsibilities to him. "Papa, you should rest more," Laura would say, but her visits always included walks through the house where she would comment on furniture and artwork as if appraising them. "Papa, let me take care of you," Chidi would offer. But his idea of care was hiring expensive nurses while he went out to parties with his friends. 2 weeks into his performance, Karlos called his family together for the meeting that would change everything. "I have something difficult to tell you," Karlos began, his voice weaker than usual. He had been practicing this performance for days, but the emotion in his voice was real, the pain of testing the people he loved most. "Yesterday, Dr. Adebayo gave me the results of my tests," he continued, watching their faces carefully. "My heart is failing. The damage from the heart attack was worse than we thought. He says I have perhaps 6 months to live." The silence that followed was profound, but not in the way Karlos had hoped. Chidi sat up straighter, suddenly very alert. "Papa, what do the doctors recommend? Should we get a second opinion? Fly in specialists?" But even as he asked these questions, Karlos could see his son's mind working, calculating, planning. Lara gasped and covered her mouth, but her other hand immediately went to her purse, pulling out her phone as if she needed to make urgent calls, but not to doctors. Obina leaned forward with apparent concern. "Papa, don't worry about anything. We'll handle all the business matters so you can focus on getting better. You shouldn't stress about financial decisions anymore." Adana began to cry, but her tears seemed almost rehearsed, as if she had been preparing for this moment. "I want to spend my remaining time with family," Karlos said, his heart breaking as he watched their reactions. "I want to remember what matters most." Everyone nodded and made promises about spending more time together, but Karlos could see something else in their eyes. Relief mixed with anticipation, as if a long-awaited business deal was finally moving forward. Only his old housemaid, Mama Kemi, showed genuine emotion. She had been quietly dusting in the corner during his announcement, and when she heard the news, she began to weep openly. Real tears for a man she had served faithfully for 30 years. She quickly left the room, but not before Karlos saw her shoulders shaking with true grief. Within days, Karlos's worst fears were confirmed. His family transformed before his eyes, revealing their true nature like actors dropping their masks. Chidi moved back into the family mansion to care for Papa, but his version of care was asking, "Are you comfortable, Papa?" while scrolling through his phone and making plans for expensive purchases after the inheritance comes through. One evening, Karlos pretended to sleep while Chidi talked loudly on the phone in the next room. 6 months maximum, Chidi was saying. Maybe less if we're lucky. I've already talked to the lawyer about expediting the will. There's enough money for the recording studio, the cars, everything we planned. The casual cruelty in his youngest son's voice made Karlos's chest tighten with real pain. Lara began visiting daily, but her visits followed a disturbing pattern. She would hug him briefly, ask about his comfort, then disappear into other parts of the house with a notebook, making detailed inventories of furniture, artwork, and jewelry. Karlos discovered her notes one day, pages and pages of descriptions and estimated values of everything in the house, organized by room like a catalog for an estate sale. The dining room set, antique mahogany, approximately 2 million naira, she had written. The living room Persian rugs, 3.5 million naira. Papa's gold watch collection, 1.8 million naira. She had reduced his entire life to a shopping list. Obinna became suddenly interested in spending quality time with his father, but every conversation steered toward business. He brought documents for Karlos to sign, suggesting that transferring power of attorney would reduce stress during this difficult time. "Let me handle everything, Papa," Obinna would say. "You should focus on enjoying your remaining time." But Karlos noticed that the documents Obinna brought would give him complete control over the family businesses, and some of the transfers had already been initiated without Karlos's knowledge. Most heartbreaking of all was watching Adana transform. His wife of 35 years began dressing differently. Younger clothes, expensive jewelry, frequent trips to expensive salons. She glowed with a youth and energy that Karlos hadn't seen in years. "I need to take care of myself during this stressful time," she explained when he commented on her new appearance. But one evening, while pretending to nap in his chair, Karlos saw something that shattered his heart completely. Through the window, he watched Adana in their garden with a man he didn't recognize, a younger man with smooth skin and expensive clothes. They were talking intimately, holding hands, and when the man kissed her, she responded with passion Karlos hadn't seen from her in decades. "Soon, my darling," he heard her whisper. "Soon we can be together openly. He's getting weaker every day." The man stroked her cheek tenderly. "You've been so patient, my love. Soon you'll be free to live the life you deserve." Karlos closed his eyes and felt something die inside him. Not his body, but his spirit. The woman he had loved and provided for his entire adult life was already living in the future, a future where he was dead and gone. But in the darkness of his family's betrayal, Karlos discovered light from the most unexpected sources. Mama Kemi, his 70-year-old housekeeper, became his angel. Every evening she would sit beside his bed, bringing him specially prepared meals and telling him stories from their village. "Chief," she said one night, her weathered hands gentle as she adjusted his blankets, "you gave my children education when I could not afford school fees. You paid for my husband's medicine when he was sick. You helped my family when we had nothing. I will not abandon you now." Her loyalty, pure and uncomplicated by money or inheritance, brought tears to Karlos's eyes. Taiwo, his young driver, also showed unexpected kindness. The 26-year-old man began arriving early and staying late, always ready to take Karlos wherever he needed to go, but more importantly, always ready to listen. "Sir," Taiwo said one day as they sat in the car outside a fake doctor's appointment, "my grandfather died 2 years ago. I regret not spending more time with him, not learning his stories. If you want to talk about anything, your childhood, your dreams, I am here to listen." And most precious of all was little Amaka, Lara's 8-year-old daughter. While the adults whispered and schemed in corners, Amaka would climb onto her grandfather's lap and simply hold his hand. "Grandpa," she said one afternoon, her small voice serious and sweet, "Mama says you're very sick, but you don't look sick to me. You just look sad." Her innocent observation nearly broke Carlos's resolve to continue the test. "Sometimes sadness can make people sicker than any disease," he whispered, holding her small hand in his large one. "Then I will tell you jokes every day," she declared with fierce determination. "And I will draw you pictures of happy things." Every day after that, Amaka brought him crayon drawings, flowers, rainbows, pictures of the two of them smiling together. She was the only person who asked him about his childhood, his dreams, his favorite memories, not about his money or his will. 3 months into his test, Karlos could bear no more. The family he had built, the people he had sacrificed everything for, had shown him their true hearts, and those hearts were filled with greed, not love. One evening, he overheard a conversation that finally broke his resolve to continue. From his bedroom, he could hear his entire family gathered in the dining room below, discussing his funeral arrangements like they were planning a business meeting. "We should have a grand ceremony," Obina was saying. "It's expected for someone of Papa's status." "But not too expensive," Lara added. "We'll need to preserve capital for the transitions." "What about the will reading?" Chidi asked. "How soon after the funeral can we access the accounts?" Adana's voice was calm and businesslike. "The lawyer says everything can be processed within a week if the death certificate is in order." They were planning his death like a corporate takeover, discussing his legacy in terms of logistics and profit margins. The next morning, Karlos made his decision. He called his family together one final time. They came reluctantly now, no longer bothering to hide their impatience. The pretense of grief had worn thin after 3 months of waiting for an inheritance that wasn't coming fast enough. "I have something very important to tell you," Karlos began, standing straighter than he had in months. They looked at him with expressions of weary patience, as if humoring a dying old man's final wishes. "The truth is," Karlos said, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I am not dying." The silence that followed was electric with shock and confusion. "For 3 months, I have been testing all of you," he continued, watching their faces transform from confusion to understanding to horror. "I wanted to see who would love me when I was weak, who would care for me when I had nothing left to give." "Papa, what are you saying?" Obina whispered. "I am saying that I have learned exactly who my family really is," Karlos replied, his voice filled with profound sadness. "And what I have learned has broken my heart more completely than any illness ever could." He looked at each of them. These people he had loved beyond reason, worked beyond exhaustion for, sacrificed his entire life to provide for. "Chidi, you spent 3 months planning how to spend my money on parties and luxuries, never once asking about my fears or hopes or memories. Lara, you turned my home into an auction house, cataloging my possessions like a merchant preparing for sale. Obina, you tried to steal from your dying father, moving money and assets while you thought I was too weak to notice. And Adana," his voice broke slightly as he looked at his wife, "you have been planning a new life with another man, using my money to prepare for your freedom." The room erupted in protests and explanations, but Karlos raised his hand for silence. "I have heard enough," he said quietly. "I have seen enough. You have already lost me, not to death but to the discovery that I built my entire life around people who saw me only as a source of money." In the months that followed, Karlos made changes that transformed his remaining years into the most meaningful of his life. He moved out of the mansion and into a simple house in his old neighborhood. He rewrote his will, leaving the bulk of his fortune to educational foundations and hospitals for the poor. Mama Kemi received a comfortable house and lifetime security. Taiwo got money to start his own business and pursue his education. Little Amaka would have a trust fund for her education, managed by people who would ensure it supported her growth, not spoiled her character. His family members each received modest inheritances, enough for comfortable middle-class lives, but nothing like the wealth they had expected. Karlos changed his life, spending time with abandoned elders and sharing his story with students. He founded a charity for seniors neglected by their children, realizing love mattered more than money. When he died at 87, his funeral was filled with people he'd helped. His granddaughter Amaka said, "He taught me love is freely given, not bought." Karlos's true legacy wasn't wealth, but the love, wisdom, and kindness he gave to others. All right, besties, if this story moved you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments which lesson hit you hardest. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the so you never miss a heartfelt tale. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that love is the richest legacy. See you in the next one.